Lucas Carter sat on the cracked sidewalk, his drawings spread out on an old bedsheet, the edges curling in the wind. A hand-painted sign leaned against a metal coffee can. Art for sale. Help save Danny. The words felt heavier than they looked. He had written them 3 times, pressing the marker harder each time, as if bold letters could change reality. Pedestrians passed by, some glancing, most pretending not to see. That was the worst part. Not the rejection, not even the silence, but the way people avoided eye contact. As if his problem was contagious. As if acknowledging his existence would somehow make them responsible for it. Lucas had been here since noon, the hot concrete burning through his jeans. He sold 3 paintings. $17, a fortune to a kid on a normal day. Nowhere near enough for what he needed. Danny was in the hospital again. His little brother, 8 years old. His body too tired to fight. There was a new treatment, something experimental, something with a real chance. But insurance didn't cover it. Their mom was drowning, working double shifts at a 24-hour diner, leaving before sunrise, coming home after midnight, doing everything she could to hold things together. Their dad? He walked out years ago. No goodbye, no forwarding address. That left Lucas, a 12-year-old with a sketchbook and a desperate plan. He wasn't good at sports. He wasn't good at math. He wasn't good at making money. But he could draw. And if he could draw, maybe he could sell. And if he could sell, maybe, just maybe, he could help. He rearranged his paintings again, smoothing the edges, making sure the best ones were up front, bright colors. Happy things. People didn't like sad. His favorite piece sat at the center, a red basketball, frozen midair against a wide blue sky. No hoop, no player, just the ball, suspended, weightless, endless. A reminder that not everything had to fall. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the pavement. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Packing up meant giving up. And he wasn't giving up. A middle-aged couple slowed near the blanket, their eyes flicking toward the sign. Lucas perked up, ready with a smile. They kept walking. A man in a business suit checked his watch as he stepped around the display, not even bothering to look. A woman jogging with headphones barely registered he was there. Lucas swallowed hard, staring at the coffee can. $17. Not even enough for gas money to the next hospital appointment. A gust of wind rattled the sign. The marker had smudged in places. Maybe that's why no one was stopping. Maybe they thought it was fake, some kind of scam. He should have made it neater. He should have picked a busier street. He should have... A shadow fell across the blanket. Lucas blinked up, squinting into the sun. A tall man stood there, arms crossed, head tilted as he studied the paintings. The glare made it impossible to see his face. Lucas sat up straighter, heart pounding. A customer. A real one. The man crouched, flipping through the paintings. He took his time, pausing at a few, considering. Finally, he picked up the basketball painting. How much for this one? Lucas hesitated. He hadn't meant to put that one up for sale. It was the last painting he finished before everything changed. Before hospital visits and medical bills and nights spent listening to his mom cry behind a closed door. He forced his voice to stay steady. $20. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. No change, he said. Lucas froze. 100? For one painting? He scrambled to his feet, fingers shaking as he took the money. His mouth opened, but before he could say thank you, the man asked, "Where's your brother getting treated?" Lucas's breath caught. No one had asked that. They read the sign, maybe nodded with pity, but no one actually asked. He swallowed. Lakeshore Children's Hospital. The man nodded like he already knew. Then he straightened, tucking the painting carefully under his arm. He turned to go, pausing just long enough to say, "Keep drawing." And then he walked away. Lucas watched him go, the $100 bill clutched in his hand. A real one, a big one. Enough for parking fees, enough for gas, enough for something. The man disappeared into the crowd, but the painting he took, that would stay. Lucas exhaled, glancing down at the bill one more time. Then suddenly a thought hit him. He had seen that man before, on TV, on posters, on jerseys hanging in sports stores. He whipped his head back toward the sidewalk, eyes darting through the crowd, scanning for a glimpse of him. But it was too late. Michael Jordan was already gone. The next morning, Lucas woke to the sound of his mom on the phone. Her voice was sharp, half-whispered, the kind she used when she didn't want him to hear. But he heard anyway. No, there must be a mistake. I didn't. A pause. What do you mean it's paid? All of it? Lucas sat up. His stomach flipped. His mom's footsteps moved toward the kitchen. A chair scraped against the floor. The conversation continued in hushed, urgent tones. He threw on yesterday's sweatshirt and crept closer, heart pounding. Anonymous? She repeated, her voice unsteady. The entire balance? Who? Silence. Then, slowly, she let out a breath. A different kind of silence followed. Not the heavy, exhausted kind he was used to, but something else. Something like disbelief. Thank you, she finally said. Thank you. She hung up, the phone landing on the table with a soft thud. Lucas stepped into the doorway. Mom? She looked up, eyes wide like she'd forgotten he was there. The hospital just called, she said, shaking her head like she couldn't believe her own words. Someone paid for Danny's treatments. Lucas's pulse roared in his ears. Like, all of it? Everything. For a second, neither of them spoke. Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. Michael Jordan. His mom wiped a hand over her face, staring at the phone like it might ring again and take it all back. They won't tell me who, Lucas swallowed. He could tell her. He could blurt it out right now. Tell her about the $100 bill, about the man in the park, about how the whole thing suddenly made sense. But something stopped him. If Michael Jordan wanted them to know, wouldn't he have said something? His mom exhaled. I don't understand. Lucas did. Not completely, not all the way, but enough. She shook her head again, as if trying to clear it. I have to go to work. Lucas barely heard her. His mind was still racing. A knock on the front door made them both jump. His mom frowned, checking the time. Too early for the mail. Too early for anything. She opened the door. A package sat on the welcome mat. No return address. No name. Lucas's breath caught. His mom hesitated before picking it up, flipping it over. Nothing. She tore through the tape, pulling out the contents. A basketball. Not just any basketball. A signed one. The smooth orange surface gleamed under the kitchen light, covered in Sharpie signatures. The entire Chicago Bulls team. At the top, bold and unmistakable, was one signature that stood out from the rest. Michael Jordan. A folded piece of paper slipped from the box. Lucas snatched it before it hit the floor. It was handwritten. Just a few words. Stay strong. Keep creating. Your fan. His mom's mouth parted slightly. Lucas gripped the note, pulse racing. He thought the $100 bill was a fluke. A moment of kindness, a good deed. But this wasn't random. His mom exhaled, still staring at the basketball like it might vanish. Who would? Lucas pressed his lips together. He could tell her now. He could say it. But again, something held him back. Some things weren't meant to be explained. Some things just were. The next day, another package arrived. This time, a sketchbook, a real one. Not the dollar store kind Lucas had been using, where the pages bled through. This was leather-bound, thick paper, professional. His name was even engraved on the cover. Another note. Keep drawing. Your fan. That night, he stayed up late, flipping through the blank pages. His fingers twitched, itching to fill them. But something about the crisp, untouched paper felt heavy, like it deserved more than just doodles. So he waited. The next week, a third package, a set of watercolor paints, the expensive kind he'd only ever seen behind locked glass at the art store. The kind professionals used. Keep creating. Your fan. His mom barely questioned it anymore. She still looked suspicious, still checked every label like she expected to find a catch, but she didn't send anything back. She just let it happen. Lucas kept quiet. He didn't tell anyone. But inside, something started to change. At night, while the rest of the world slept, he opened the new sketchbook. He dipped a brush into the watercolors, and he painted. Not just to sell, not just for money. He painted because he had to. Because something inside him was waking up. Because someone out there, someone who didn't even know him, believed in him enough to make sure he never stopped. The news about Danny spread fast. His treatments were working. The doctors were optimistic. Lucas didn't dare let himself hope too much. Not yet. But hope had a way of creeping in, whether he wanted it to or not. Then one day, his mom came home with an envelope. She dropped it onto the table, eyes unreadable. You got an email, Lucas blinked. From who? She slid the printout toward him. The sender, Jordan Brand Foundation. The subject, we'd like to meet. Lucas read the email 3 times, but the words still didn't feel real. The Jordan Brand Foundation wanted to meet with him. Not a rejection, not a polite brush off. A meeting. His mom didn't say much, just watched him with the same careful expression she'd worn ever since the hospital called about Danny's bills. The same expression she had when the signed basketball arrived, when the sketchbook showed up, when package after package landed at their doorstep with no explanation. Like she was trying to figure out if this was real or if the universe was playing some cruel trick. Lucas didn't know either, but the email was real. The meeting was real. And a week later, he was sitting in a sleek office lobby in downtown Chicago, his sketchbook balanced on his lap, his fingers gripping the edges like it was the only solid thing in the room. A man in a suit, Thomas Reynolds, Senior Director of Community Partnerships, led them into a conference room. Lucas's mom sat beside him, her shoulders tense. Then Thomas smiled and said 7 words that sent Lucas's brain spinning. Michael Jordan personally asked us to reach out. Everything inside him froze. He knew it. He had known it from the moment the hospital called, from the moment that first package arrived, from the moment the man in the park handed him a $100 bill and walked away with his basketball painting. But hearing it out loud, that made it something else. Thomas folded his hands on the table, his expression unreadable. Michael saw your work. He thinks you have talent. Lucas's mouth was too dry to speak. He also heard about your brother. A pause. He wanted to help. Lucas's mom let out a quiet breath, the kind that almost sounded like relief. Like she had been bracing for something else, a catch, a condition, a fine print no one had warned them about. But Thomas didn't pull out a contract. He didn't ask for anything. He just leaned forward slightly and said, "Michael wants to fund an art exhibition for you." Lucas's stomach flipped. An exhibition? For him? He barely managed to whisper, "Why?" Thomas didn't blink. "Because you deserve it." The next few minutes blurred together. Logistics, dates, potential locations. His mom asked the questions. Lucas barely processed the answers. All he could think was, Michael Jordan knows who I am. Michael Jordan top believes in me. It didn't feel real. Not when they left the building. Not when they got home. Not even when an official-looking packet arrived in the mail 2 days later with details about the upcoming event. But reality had a way of sinking in, whether he was ready or not. News spread fast. A local newspaper picked up the story. 12-year-old artist Lucas Carter to hold charity art exhibition, sponsored by Jordan Brand. Then a radio station called. Then a TV segment. Then strangers started following his art account online, commenting on old posts, asking when his work would be available for purchase. Lucas wasn't used to attention. Not like this. And as the days ticked closer to the exhibition, something new settled in his chest. Fear. What if the paintings weren't good enough? What if people came expecting something great, only to realize he was just a kid who got lucky? What if this was all a mistake? The night before the exhibition, he stared at the blank page of his sketchbook, heart pounding. He thought about Danny, sleeping in the hospital. Thought about his mom, who had spent months carrying more weight than any person should. Thought about Michael Jordan, who had once been a kid with a basketball and just hoping someone would see something in him. Lucas picked up his brush. He painted, not to impress, not to prove anything. He painted because he had to, because something inside him was still waking up. The next morning, the gallery was packed. People he didn't know, reporters, artists, strangers who had seen the news and decided to show up. And then a familiar figure stepped through the crowd, tall, calm, commanding without trying. Lucas's pulse nearly stopped. Michael Jordan was there, watching, waiting. Then he nodded, like he already knew, like he had been waiting for this moment just as much as Lucas had. Lucas stood frozen, gripping the edge of the display table as Michael Jordan scanned the room, his gaze moving from painting to painting. The air inside the gallery felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. Conversation slowed. People stepped aside instinctively, parting like waves. Michael didn't say anything at first. He just looked. Not in the way people usually did. Not like he was being polite. Not like he was here for a publicity stunt. He studied the paintings the way a coach studies a game tape. Seeing everything, looking for the story beneath the surface. Lucas barely breathed. Michael stopped in front of the biggest piece in the collection. The one Lucas had painted the night before, when doubt had almost swallowed him whole. A boy standing at the free throw line. a basketball in his hands. But instead of a hoop, the net was a void, a swirling abyss of fear, pressure, expectation. The boy's face was tilted slightly upward, just enough to suggest that he hadn't given up, that he was going to take the shot anyway. Michael stood there for a long time. Then he turned to Lucas and nodded. Something in Lucas's chest unlocked, because that nod, that simple small nod, it was an answer to every question he'd been too afraid to ask. Michael finally spoke, his voice low enough that only Lucas could hear. "You get it?" That was it. 3 words. But they hit like a full-court pass straight to the heart, because Lucas did get it. He got what it felt like to stand there, staring down something bigger than yourself, wondering if you had any shot at making it through. He got what it meant to step up anyway, and so did Michael. The moment passed, but its weight lingered. Michael turned to the nearest gallery worker. "I'll take this one." Lucas's brain short-circuited. Wait, Michael Jordan was buying his painting? The worker fumbled for a response. Yes, sir. Of course, we'll arrange for delivery." Michael shook his head. "No, I'll take it now." Lucas watched stunned as Michael's assistant pulled out a checkbook as the gallery scrambled to wrap the canvas. Then Michael turned back to him. "You ever played basketball, kid?" Lucas blinked. "Not really." Michael smirked. "Didn't think so." Lucas felt his ears go hot. He knew he wasn't built for sports. He wasn't fast, wasn't coordinated, couldn't sink a shot to save his life. But Michael wasn't mocking him. He was thinking, considering something. And then, just as smoothly as he had appeared in Lucas's life, he turned to go. But not before saying one last thing. "I'll see you soon." Then he was gone. Lucas stood there, still reeling, as the gallery workers whispered furiously amongst themselves, as the crowd started buzzing, as people suddenly wanted to buy everything he had ever put on canvas. Because Michael Jordan didn't just buy art. Michael Jordan didn't just show up for no reason. So what the hell did "I'll see you soon" mean? He didn't have to wait long to find out. 3 days later, another package arrived at his door. Not from the Jordan Brand Foundation. Not from some anonymous donor. This time, the sender's name was printed clearly on the label. Michael Jordan. Lucas's hands shook as he opened the box. Inside was a pair of Air Jordans, but not just any Air Jordans. They were custom designed. The left shoe was covered in tiny brushstrokes like a painter's canvas. The right shoe had a single word embroidered on the heel in small, bold letters. Create. At the bottom of the box was a handwritten note. Meet me at the United Center. Bring your sketchbook. Lucas stared at the note, his heart pounding louder than a buzzer beater in overtime. Michael Jordan had just bought his painting. Michael Jordan had just sent him a personal invitation. And now, Michael Jordan wanted to see him again. What the hell was happening? Lucas stood outside the United Center, gripping his sketchbook so tightly his knuckles ached. The email from the Jordan Brand Foundation had been short and direct. Michael Jordan wanted to meet with him. No cameras, no press, just him. It didn't make sense. Nothing about the past few weeks made sense. He had started this whole thing with a pile of paintings and a coffee can. Now he was about to walk into the home of the Chicago Bulls, personally invited by the greatest basketball player of all time. Security waved him through. A staff member led him down a series of hallways until they reached a private court. Smaller than the main arena, but still massive. And there, standing at the free throw line, spinning a basketball in one hand like it weighed nothing, was Michael Jordan. He glanced up when Lucas entered, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. "You made it." Lucas nodded, his throat too dry to answer. Michael tossed him the ball. "Take a shot." Lucas caught it, barely. He had no idea what he was doing. He hadn't touched a basketball in years. Michael nodded toward the hoop. Lucas hesitated, then stepped up to the line. He squared his shoulders, bent his knees like he'd seen players do on TV, and threw. The ball clanked off the rim. Michael didn't laugh. He didn't correct him. He just motioned for the ball and shot it himself. Smooth, effortless. The net barely moved. Then he turned back to Lucas. "You know why I asked you to come here?" Lucas shook his head. Michael grabbed another ball, palming it easily. "I was 15 when I got cut from my high school varsity team. You think I was pissed? You bet. You think I wanted to quit? Almost did." He bounced the ball once, but that moment, that failure, it made me. I didn't stop. I worked harder. He passed the ball to Lucas again. I see that in you. Lucas blinked. I don't play basketball. Michael's smirk deepened. This isn't about basketball. Lucas glanced down at the ball in his hands, trying to process. Michael crossed his arms. When I first saw you selling your art, I didn't just see a kid trying to make a few bucks. I saw someone who was refusing to lose. Someone who was up against something bigger than himself and decided to fight anyway. Lucas swallowed hard. Michael nodded toward the sketchbook. Open it. Lucas obeyed, flipping to the latest page. A painting of a hot kid at the free throw line, staring at a hoop that was impossibly far away. Michael's expression softened. Yeah, that's what I saw. Lucas's pulse pounded in his ears. I don't understand. Why me? Michael's eyes didn't waver. Because I know what it's like to have people doubt you. I know what it's like to feel like the shot is impossible. But you still take it. Lucas stared at him. Michael continued, you didn't just pick up a brush and expect people to care. You put yourself out there. You took the shot. Lucas clenched his hands into fists. Danny needed me to. Michael nodded. That's why you're here. Lucas frowned. Because my brother is sick? No. Michael's voice was firm. Because you have something special. And I'm not just talking about your art. Lucas felt his stomach twist. Then what? Michael's smirk returned. You don't see it yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. But I do. He handed it over. Lucas unfolded it. A contract. At the top, bold and unmistakable, Jordan Brand Partnership Agreement. Lucas's breath caught. Michael leaned in. I don't invest in kids because I feel bad for them. I invest in winners. And you, Lucas, you're a winner. Lucas stared at the contract, his hands shaking. Michael crossed his arms. I want to fund a full art program, not just for you, for kids like you. Kids who need a place to create, to fight, to take their shot. Lucas's chest tightened. Michael nodded toward the paper. And I want you to help lead it. Lucas's heart nearly stopped. Me? Michael's smirk was pure confidence. Why not you? Lucas opened his mouth, but no words came. Michael Jordan, the Michael Jordan, was standing in front of him, offering him a chance to do something bigger than himself, to take another shot, to win. And suddenly, for the first time in his life, Lucas believed he could. Lucas sat at the kitchen table long after his mom had gone to bed, the contract spread out in front of him. The words blurred together. Jordan Brand. Art initiative. Partnership. It was too big, too much. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't some prodigy. He was just a kid who had started selling paintings because his little brother was sick. He hadn't done anything special. He had just tried. But Michael Jordan thought otherwise. The next morning, Lucas walked into Danny's hospital room, the contract tucked under his arm. His little brother looked better. Not great, not perfect, but better. The treatments were working. Danny grinned when he saw him. You look like you saw a ghost, Lucas exhaled. Michael Jordan wants me to work with him. Danny blinked. For real? Lucas dropped the contract onto the bed. For real. Danny picked it up, squinting at the text. Are you gonna do it? Lucas hesitated. I don't know. Danny studied him. Why not? Lucas ran a hand through his hair. Because what if I'm not good enough? Danny snorted. You sold paintings on a sidewalk and got the greatest basketball player in the world to notice you. You think you're not good enough? Lucas swallowed. Danny leaned back against the pillows, shaking his head. You always tell me to fight, even when it's hard, even when it sucks. You tell me to take the shot. Lucas looked down. Danny smirked. So why aren't you taking yours? Lucas had no answer. The next day, he signed the contract. Michael Jordan didn't act surprised when Lucas handed it to him. He just nodded, like he had already known what the decision would be. The months that followed were a blur. Lucas worked with designers, painters, and educators. He helped create the Jordan Art Initiative, a program that would fund art therapy for kids in hospitals across the country. The first center opened in Chicago, then Los Angeles, then Miami. At the grand opening of the first space, Lucas stood beside Michael as the ribbon was cut. The walls were lined with paintings from young artists, kids like him, kids who needed something to hold on to when the world felt impossible. He thought back to that first day on the sidewalk, when he had been nothing more than a desperate kid with a sketchbook and a dream too big for his hands. Now he was standing in a room full of kids just like him. And for the first time, he understood. Michael had seen something in him before he had seen it in himself. Not talent, resilience. Later that night, as Lucas packed up his brushes, Michael walked over, arms crossed. "So?" Lucas smirked. "Not bad," Michael chuckled. "Not bad? Kid, this is just the beginning." Lucas exhaled. "You really think so?" Michael looked around the room, at the kids laughing, painting, creating, kids who for a moment had forgotten their battles. Then he looked back at Lucas. "I know so." Lucas nodded. He had taken the shot, and this time he had made it. Thank you for being here and sharing in this journey. Some stories are bigger than the people who live them. They remind us of what's possible, of how one moment, one decision, one act of kindness can change everything. This isn't just a story about art or basketball. It's about taking the shot, even when the odds are stacked against you. It's about resilience, belief, and the people who see something in us before we see it in ourselves. Wherever you are, whatever dream you're chasing, keep going, keep creating, keep fighting, because you never know who's watching, and you never know how far one shot can go. Thank you.